Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new season of Land and Sea. I'm Jane 80. It's a special season for us. We're celebrating 60 years on the air. That's 6 decades of telling the stories of the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. To start off, we're going to go way back to the early days of this beloved show by exploring the memories of one of Land and Sea's very first hosts. It was 1964 when the CBC decided to launch a brand new show. They'd focus their lens on people making a living in the great outdoors.
Apart from the present international situation.
That's one of the early hosts, Rab Carnell, at a time when television programs were still black and white. But interviews on Land and Sea were always full of local color. Take this story from a wharf in the Battery in St. John's. Host Hal Andrews talks to Ray Rich about a new kind of hand line borrowed from the Portuguese.
Now, you have a monofilament line here. I guess this is very important too, is this?
Well, well, you can notice there it is almost invisible, and I think it's more invisible in the water. I would prefer this. It's better, and it's better for the hands.
Des Brown was another of the show's early hosts.
The fitting out of the boat is quite expensive. It costs a lot of money.
Part of Newfoundland.
And this young journalist was there at Land and Sea's inception.
But the stands of fur here at Middle Barraswa Brook and at many other streams too are doomed. They were attacked last year by a tiny insect called the hemlock looper.
That's Dave Quinton in the Codroy Valley.
With one thing.
And here he is in Bay Roberts with eel fisherman Robert Stevenson.
Now, can they bite? People are afraid of eels.
They can bite, but I've had my arms right down to the shoulders in them, in the boat. I never got a bite yet from one.
Are these the yellow
Dave
eels
Quinton
or the
still
silver?
remembers the excitement he felt doing interviews out in the field. Today, at 89 years old, he also remembers the thrill of being part of a new venture in television.
It was really a blank canvas in front of us. Nobody really said exactly what kind of a show it was. We were just told, we want you to put together a half an hour a week show about farming and fishing in Newfoundland. And that was it. Now, we were greenhorns. We knew a little bit about agriculture, and I knew a little bit about fishing. I didn't know how to jig squid, but we weren't experts. This is a picture of myself and Don, my brother, and Gerald Quinton down in Redcliffe.
Now, aside from knowing how to jig a squid, Dave Quinton had another advantage when it came to telling stories about the land and sea. Dave grew up as a hybrid Newfoundlander.
That was a long time ago. Well, I was born here in St. John's, and of parents both from Bonavista Bay, one from one side, one from the other. And my mother died when I was 4 years old, and Dad married again and took me back to his home and the way of life he was born in. So as soon as I got out of the car, I fell in love with Redcliffe. I fell in love with the place, the people, the way of life.
Years later, Dave would make a special trip back to Redcliffe as host of Land and Sea. He wanted to document the lifestyle of a fisherman still fishing the old-fashioned way with sail and oar, a man known to everyone in the community as Uncle Walter.
Besides being an inshore fisherman, you're more than that. You fish by yourself too.
Oh
right?
yes, I spend a lot of time fishing by myself. And the happiest time I was when I was fishing by myself, yes. I had no one to hire them in, or I had no one to displease me. I went when I thought it was fit to go, and I come the same. When I thought it was fit to come in, I come in. Yeah.
And you're still doing that?
I had no boss, no.
He was a magical character. Everybody fell in love with Uncle Walter.
Do you think there'll be a half-decent year?
I don't know, so they ain't got a good look. Last year it was hard tomcat fish was over in the bay. Most hard tomcat fish. Small fish everywhere.
But now you could sell other fish last year, couldn't you? The turbot.
Oh yes. The people, some of the men who was out in the gully, what they call the gully, out in the centre of the bay, yeah, they did well. They saw wolf fish and flatfish and flounder and turbot and everything. Yeah. But the codfish was scarce out in the gully last year. Yeah.
Uncle Walter was happy to tell his stories to Dave Quinton. And others in Red Cliff were eager to show their way of life to the Land and Sea crew.
Joe Bowen, a fisherman, was walking by one time and he said, "We can pull up a boat if you want. That'd be good to see, get somebody to sing Johnny Poker."
Johnny Poker, no, we'll go together.
Looking back on it now, yes, it was so special, and these are before there were tractors to pull boats up, and this was the way it was done for hundreds of years.
Viewers were captivated by the scenes on Land and Sea. They were hooked on this new show and tuned in every week for a potent dose of local culture.
People were just hungry for information and visual images of outports especially, and a way of life that was already starting to disappear. So the show just became popular very quickly. I think they enjoyed seeing their own community and their own people telling their own stories.
When we return, more of Dave Quinton's memories from the road as we continue our look back at the early days of Land and Sea.
You're going to be out for the whole trip? Or?
No, just for the golf trip.
Dave Quinton has captured stunning photos of rural Newfoundland and Labrador, and he wasn't a tourist for most of his journeys. No, Dave was paid to travel around the province and to be curious.
I had the best job in the world.
60 years ago, Dave Quinton was among a small group of journalists at the CBC embarking on a new adventure, a show called Land and Sea.
I've seen just about every place in Newfoundland, and that's an incredible honor for me. And to be able to let people give their views and to telecast it and show the world what we're all about.
Dave remembers at the outset, though, not everyone was keen on having a camera pointed in their face.
I think at the very beginning there was a bit of suspicion. Who are you guys coming in here and what do you want to do? But that didn't last very long, because once the show went to air and people saw, hey, this is how they live in the next cove, and look at so and so. He told the story pretty well, and we should do the same.
Gaining trust in communities proved to be easy, but reaching them, well, Dave explains that was challenging at times.
The road system wasn't like it is today. You couldn't really drive across the island when we started in '64. It wasn't finished. The TCH wasn't finished. And there were other places that had gravel roads and dusty roads and watery roads.
And once the crew had captured the story, there were technical hurdles to navigate.
You must remember, years ago, when we started Land and Sea, there was no video. Gosh, there wasn't much television, come to think of it. We had to use film then. It was film we had to send away to Halifax to get processed before we even saw what we got. You were on pins and needles waiting to see if the plane got in and whether the film worked or not, or whether you made a mistake. Then what do? Call a few people in the studio and have a dull studio conversation. Because really we wanted film, we wanted outports, and that's where the stories were.
And stories by the yaffle.
Oh my Lord, stories all over the place. That's one of the things that amazes people. People say, where do you get all the story ideas? Well, that's the easiest thing in the world.
Land and Sea's cameras captured many parts of rural life that no longer exist. The launching of boats off a beach with nothing but logs and the strong hands and even stronger will of the local men. They all worked together to get the job done. There were stories about whaling. Fishermen demonstrating for Land and Sea how they used a harpoon gun to land a giant like this humpback whale. They sawed into the blubber with giant knives. All that meat a boon for a small community. In the woods, there were no quads or side-by-sides. Freshly cut timber was drawn by horse and sleigh. And Land and Sea documented the now iconic images of codfish spread out on beaches like these in Cook's Harbor on the northern peninsula. The day's catch drying on flakes in communities all over the province. In 1968, Dave Quinton looked on as sealers boarded the Chesley A. Crosby sealing vessel for their trip to the Gulf.
I remember the men being called on the ship.
Sandy good here. Henry Rogers.
Have you been going to the seal hunt very long?
This is 26 Springs.
What's your name, sir? Where are you from?
Eli Road, Marsh Light.
Well, do you like it out at the ice too?
Oh,
do you have
love
any
it,
good
yeah,
times out there?
Yeah, I love it, yeah. I say I love it.
Yeah.
But I'm not as young as I used to be, you know.
You got a pretty good bunch on? Do you know all the men on board?
Oh, yes, pretty well, yeah. They're good young fellas, all of them, yeah. Best corn.
Where are you from?
Fogo.
From Fogo, yeah. Very good. Well, I hope you have a good voyage.
The sealing industry itself has changed, of course. The big ships don't go out anymore. So there were stories there that can't be told anymore because it's a new era now.
Pieces of our culture that might have been erased from the province's collective memory. Land and Sea has been there for 6 decades, ensuring those images remain.
We'll be delighted years from now to see some of these captured on film because once they're gone, they're gone.
When we come back, Dave Quinton's most memorable episodes and Land and Sea classics still fresh in the minds of some viewers today. Back when Land and Sea marked its 25th anniversary in 1989, the theme may have sounded different, but the kinds of stories featured have never really changed. Back then, Dave Quinton was at the helm.
Land and Sea, a program that celebrates a time and a place and a people.
Today, 60 years after the show started, Dave remembers there was always a boatload of ideas to choose from. And if he wanted to bring the audience on a true adventure, Labrador was the place to go.
There are streams and lakes near the tent. That's one reason why his father picked this place to camp in. Whitefish, suckers, and the lake trout, the cuckamish, abound in the waters of Labrador. Nook's mother, Monique, will prepare the fish, and in the evenings in the camp, they will eat and talk and plan the morrow.
It seems like you couldn't miss in Labrador. Whatever shows you did, they seemed to really interest people, and they were new and revealing. Of course, this was new territory for television then, and that made it all the more interesting to us.
Here we were, surrounded by hundreds of pounds of fresh frozen caribou meat.
We went caribou hunting with the Inuit in northern Labrador one time. That was an interesting assignment. It was in the spring when we went there, but still there was snow everywhere. We went by Skidoo up the rivers and the frozen rivers and way in the wilderness where the caribou were.
It's very wild country in there when you get in there. Back in 1972, we were stuck in there for 29 days. We was in this windstorm, and you just couldn't move out the snow house. You know, we were just stuck there, and we just had to take the consequences. And regardless of what happened, we couldn't move.
5 Newfoundlanders and 4 Labradors.
People featured on Land and Sea were eager for the rest of the province to understand their communities and their industries. The fishery had no shortage of challenging issues.
And I guarantee you, sir, I'm not telling you I'm the best, there are long lives from it, but if the fish was here, I'm going to have some. But they're not here, we just can't get them.
If you were dependent upon cod only, you wouldn't pay the bread box there, sir, the way she's going now. And that's what I'm very much afraid of now when you speak about fishery, the way that we're cleaning up this ground. The distance that we're gone, even so if we're using that much more gear, but we're cleaning up this man as fast as you can all line.
Many of them could see the trouble. In the distance, they could see lights at sea. They knew the draggers were there. The draggers are coming from all over the world. 14 or 15 countries, I think, were fishing the Grand Banks and the Northern Sea. So, and meanwhile, the fish were starting to get smaller, and there weren't as many on the inshore grounds. So, yes, they were angry and frustrated that the fish was being taken away from them. It was frustrating. What could we do? We could only air their views on TV, and hopefully the politicians, the leaders would respond to it. But yes, we saw a lot of angry fishermen.
Land and Sea was a place for tough talk and also a place for soft reflection. Dave recalls a story from 1984 about our heritage across the pond.
It was about our roots in England and Ireland. So I went with Otto Tucker and Ellie O'Brien. Otto to England, of course, and Ellie to Ireland, and traced and followed them along as they explored the land of their ancestors.
Your name is O'Brien, I believe.
Yes.
Isn't that grand? You're Joseph.
Yes.
Yes, from Mooncoin.
Yes. Show present.
Yes, my name is O'Brien too. My people came from here, somewhere in this area, 200 years ago. Lived here 200 years ago and went to live in Newfoundland. And we could very well be cousins. We could indeed. Yes.
That was a popular show. At the time I said to myself, my God, how is this going to interest people in Alberta and Manitoba? But it was, because I was told afterwards that it was the most popular show in Canada that year.
Don't seem like Christmas.
And speaking of popular shows, A Fortune Bay Christmas aired in 1986, affectionately known as the Mummer Show.
We tried to take it off several times because it was worn out. But no, it wasn't worn out. People still love it today. And it was done really by the people of that community. You know, Bud Davidge and his friends, they organized things. All we had to do was walk in with the cameras, turn them on, and the show happened.
The same year Land and Sea began, the Department of Wildlife attempted to introduce buffalo to Newfoundland. They took bison from Alberta and brought them to Brunette Island to see how they'd fare. The landscape proved to be too rocky and the cliffs too sheer. Gradually, the buffalo disappeared, all but one.
There was only one that fishermen would see on the cliffs. So we went there and filmed everything we could see, but we didn't see a buffalo. Had to go back again.
On their third trip to Brunette Island, Dave finally got the show he'd been wanting.
It's not a small island, and I guess we were getting a bit older. But amazingly, we found him.
My goodness, Dave. I was right on top of him, boy. Gee, you looked me right now.
That's something. I nearly walked on.
Oh man. Right there, and he was there. Boy, he must be 1,500 pounds or more. Yeah. He looked twice as big as that when I saw him down there in those woods.
Dave Quinton remembers vividly the sight of that saltwater buffalo, and he remembers a shock that came to the show in 1990.
Do I ever? I lost my job.
We had no idea it was going to be anything like this.
It was the year of the biggest cuts to the CBC in Newfoundland and Labrador. Staff learned that all local current affairs programs, including Land and Sea, would be axed. Bill Kelly was co-hosting Land and Sea at that time.
I didn't hear any mention of the Newfoundland audience who have come to rely on the kind of work that we do in this province. I'm just poisoned.
Dave credits his partner, Bill Kelly, and the public with saving the show.
Well, the public outcry just brought it back. Bill stuck in there and helped organize the protests. And the protest was effective. People were clamoring all over the place to reinstate Land and Sea. Don't let it go. I'm proud of that.
When he was going to work.
The CBC did reinstate the show, and Land and Sea sailed on. And here we are today, celebrating 60 years on the air. Dave Quinton is convinced there could be 60 more.
Simply, I hope it continues forever. Wherever you go, every community has not just a story, it has stories. And they need to be told.